Hi, everyone. This is Bob Dietrich. Welcome to the ADHD Toolbox. We have another episode for you where we're going to discuss something that you may never have heard of before, and it's called an HSP, or highly sensitive person. And today, our guest is Cristen Jacobson, and she's going to tell us exactly what that is and how it intersects with ADHD. So it should be an interesting and exciting topic. And Cristen, welcome to our program.
Thank you, Bob. So happy to be here.
Yeah, thanks for coming. And so tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got involved with HSPs.
Okay, so I am a life, business, and health coach.
Mm-hmm.
And I have been around people with ADHD my entire life because I grew up in a family with parents with ADHD and siblings with ADHD.
Mm-hmm.
And I have some mild attention issues myself, and I also have 4 children that I've raised with varying degrees of ADHD or attention issues.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also, what you talked about before, a highly sensitive person, as are most of the people that I grew up around that also have ADHD. So there hasn't been a lot of research done on how these two intersect yet. But it's been talked about that hypersensitivity is part of the ADHD profile from the very beginning in books like Scattered and Driven to Distraction and those sort of ADHD Bibles. Those authors talk about hypersensitivity in ADHD and what this looks like and how it affects our lives. So I added the piece in my business after raising all these kids and going through all of this with family members and starting to see clients in my coaching business that had this hypersensitivity and ADHD as well, a lot of them. And so I started coming up with strategies to help people have a better life and function better if you're a highly sensitive person and or you have ADHD as well.
All right. Well, let's dig into that a little bit. And can you define what a highly sensitive person is?
Yes. So hypersensitivity or an HSP, and there's the highly sensitive person and the highly sensitive child, HSC and HSP. Those are the terms that are used. Mm-hmm. So what that is there's about 20% of the beings or the population of the planet Earth are HSPs. And that's adults, children. It's also found in animals and in plants and various forms of nature. And this has been documented.
Okay.
This is all based on the research of a woman named Dr. Elaine Aron. And she has a very interesting website, hsperson.com. She's written several books about HSPs and HSCs. And so this is all based on her research. And what this has shown is that this roughly 20% of the population is much more sensitive as a personality trait than the other 80% of the population. So why is this important? Well, awareness is key, right? We all know that regardless of whatever situation you're dealing with, the more you understand and know about yourself and how you're wired and what your beliefs and thoughts and emotions are, that education is, very important, and it can help you live your life in a better way. So Dr. Elaine Aron came up with this information, and it's noted as a personality trait in her body of work. And the HSP, what really, the hallmarks of that are that HSPs process everything on a deeper level. So everything in their environment, including themselves. So when they walk into a room, they are noticing things about the room and processing information about the room in a much deeper way than the average person. These are the kind of people that cannot, walk into a room they haven't been in for 6 months and say, oh, you changed this chair over here, you moved this plant. right? Because they're processing so deeply everything in their environment. That also means that they're processing the emotions of everyone in their environment as well. And what does this lead to? Because it's a lot of extra work, it leads to overstimulation in a lot of different environments. So a person who's a non-HSP might go to a sporting event and have a great time because they're with all these other people and they're cheering on their team and all of that. But an HSP is completely overwhelmed because they've processed everything so deeply and they become overstimulated. HSPs also have much more empathy than the average person for other people, because they are processing everybody else's emotions and they're sensing all the subtleties so much deeper, and they actually have a much larger, sort of broader understanding of what's themes in the world and things that are happening. And how does that intersect with ADHD? Well, a lot of those traits actually overlap, right? ADHD is a learning difference, I like to call it, rather than disorder. It's a learning difference where people do become overstimulated very easily. And also, they are processing differently. They don't have the ability to filter as well. That's not built in. So while the average person is thinking about one or two things, what am I going to eat for lunch? And what do I need to do? What's the task I'm working on right now? And what am I going to do tomorrow? The person with ADHD is actually thinking about 10 different things at one time. So they don't have the ability to filter. And so filtering is an important thing that actually connects the hypersensitivity and the ADHD.
Right, right. And so is that what a HSP does as well?
Yes, they're both hallmark traits. Yes.
So what is the difference between the two? Because I mean, as I'm hearing you talk, it's like, that sounds like what a few of our guests have described as ADHD, and maybe they haven't broken that part out. Maybe they haven't distinguished an HSP from ADHD. But what are the differences? How do you know whether you're ADHD or HSP, and why would it matter? Is the way that you handle it differently? But so let's go into first, how do you distinguish it? And then we'll go into, why it matters and how you would treat one differently than the other.
Right. So the basic difference, and like I said, this hasn't been studied, this overlap hasn't been studied very much yet. And the people that do the HSP research and work, they do not understand the correlation yet, because it hasn't been studied. They're researchers, so researchers are really focused on what they can prove right now, right? Rather than those of us that are operating out in the world as coaches and therapists, et cetera, and we're working with what we see in our own practices, right? So the real difference between HSPs and ADHD is the ability to concentrate or focus. Generally speaking, people that are HSPs do have the ability to focus and concentrate, unless they're overstimulated because they've been processing so much. So in other words, they can go into a quiet room and do their homework if they're a child, and they can function just fine doing that. Whereas the child with ADHD, they actually oftentimes will do better doing their homework in an environment where there's noise. Can't be too much noise because they still have to focus,
right.
But they might have music playing, or they might be, twirling their hair, right? Because that's an activity. They might be bouncing a ball next to them while they're doing their homework, that kind of a thing. Because they don't do well going into a quiet room and studying. They can't focus. There's not enough of a distraction because they don't have a system, and so they actually do better when they're multitasking in a lot of ways.
Got it. Okay. So they're doing better when they multitask. And what does an HSP person do?
So an HSP person, right, they definitely don't do as well multitasking, they can get very overstimulated by multitasking. So
Okay.
then if you have somebody, a child that has both, or an adult that is ADHD and HSP, you have those two things that are in conflict with each other, right?
Mm-hmm.
You have the child that's trying to do their homework. They need some kind of a stimulation around them to really do their homework. And then they also can't have too much stimulation, because then they get exhausted and they can't function and do their homework because they're too tired now from overprocessing and overstimulation.
Right. And so there's a balance that has to happen there, it sounds like.
Right.
Is that what you experienced with your children, or is it yourself, or who in your family had HSP?
Actually, I'm an HSP, and also 3 of my 4 kids are HSPs. And
So,
we all have some version of ADHD as well.
so you found that you've had to balance that in your own household, is between the overstimulation and the understimulation, it sounds like.
Excuse me. Yes,
Got it.
definitely.
Okay. So what's the treatment of this HS situation?
So a lot of it is a similar treatment as to what you would do with ADHD. First, as we said, it's about awareness and understanding. And it's also part of that awareness and understanding is about really honoring what's happening with you. So the outlook of there's something wrong with me is the same with somebody who has ADHD, a child who has ADHD, and a child who is an HSP. Right? They feel like there's something wrong with them because they're different. They're very different from the rest of the people that they know. So honoring that whatever that situation is, and not expecting yourself to function the same as other people around you.
Even other people with ADHD, or?
Right. Yes, even other people with ADHD. Because if you have somebody else who's got ADHD, but they're not an HSP, they function and look very differently than you do.
Yeah. Most of the people I've talked to, in fact, all of them have kind of indicated that people with ADHD, when they're at school, they feel alienated and alone. And it's interesting, though, because, thinking back on the interviews and the conversations, it's like they're saying it's 25% of the population, approximately, that have ADHD. And if they're feeling alienated and alone, they still have 25% in their own grade that should probably be ADHD. They should probably gravitate toward them, but they're not socially mature. So I guess they just don't pick up on those cues, or they don't realize that there are other people that are like them until they go into an all ADHD class or all ADHD program. I'm just kind of thinking out loud here that it would be interesting that that seems like there would be a significant number of people, kids in school, that would have ADHD, and they could actually gravitate toward each other, but that still doesn't happen. It's probably because of the social development that they struggle with. But and it sounds like that's even more so with an HSP. And with an HSP, you just so we're getting the numbers straight, you were saying it was about 20%. So now if we add that to the 25% of ADHD, we're at we're almost at 50%. So it must be a subset of that ADHD number then. Is that correct?
Yes, it's definitely considered a comorbid condition in a lot of situations.
Right, but it's part of it's a percentage of the ADHD population. It sounds like maybe did you mean 20% of the entire ADHD population, or
20% of the entire population as a whole?
All right, and
with or without ADHD.
Okay.
So that's what the numbers that we don't know yet. We don't know how many people with ADHD are also what you would term as HSPs. We do know that most people with ADHD, especially the children, have some amount of hypersensitivity.
Got it.
because they, you know, I often hear, and I'm sure you have too, that there are, you know, clients or children that will not wear certain fabrics because they're uncomfortable. I've heard many times that parents have to have their kids turn their socks inside out
Right.
because the seam of the sock is bothering their feet.
Right.
That's a hypersensitivity, for example.
Yeah. And that seems like a common ADHD situation or symptom. And I think where you're leading to is that maybe a lot of doctors are not diagnosing the HSP part of it. They're only they see these conditions and they're just diagnosing the ADHD, and they're not distinguishing the HSP part. Would you?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right.
Okay. So if that's the case, what is the benefit? What is the purpose of distinguishing this from ADHD and not just lumping it in and treating it the same?
Well, like we talked about before, if
Mm-hmm.
you have a child that has ADHD and is an HSC, a highly sensitive child, and has a larger amount of hypersensitivity, because we just talked about the fact that most children with ADHD have some amount of hypersensitivity, whether it's, you know, the clothes they wear or the fact that they are likely to suffer from asthma or eczema or allergies, which would be a physical hypersensitivity. And they're also easily overwhelmed by too much information. So if you have that subset already happening in somebody's life, or those types of things in a child's life, and then you add the hypersensitivity to it, which really magnifies all of those things. And like we said, some of them become contradictory to each other in your life as a child with ADHD and HSC. So it becomes about how do you manage those things and how do you help your children manage those things so that they are not feeling as isolated, so that they don't have all the negative self-talk. Because you already have a lot of that in the ADHD profile. You have these kids that don't feel like they don't fit in. They have that negative self-talk going on about why are they different, and why, you know, the adults around them are kind of saying, why can't you, you know, handle your homework better? Why can't you handle your emotions better? Whatever that looks like. And then you have the HSC kids that are also, their parents are also saying, why can't you just be a little more even keeled? Why can't you, you know, toughen up a little bit? Why are you so sensitive all the time?
Right.
Right? So those meltdowns in HSC children with ADHD become even bigger and more frequent. And it becomes about really making these kids feel safe and feel like they're not alone. Like, to your point, they're not alone. There are other children with this kind of a profile, but they do tend to isolate themselves. And a lot of that is self-preservation.
So, so what do parents do in this case? I mean, if you have a parent out there watching this video and they've gone to the doctor, they've been diagnosed, or they're pretty sure their child has ADD or ADHD, what do you tell a parent about HSP or HSC, and you know why it's important, and what do you do to diagnose it? What do you do to counteract it and help the child?
There are questionnaires that are on Dr. Aaron's website, and they're also on my website under tools. There are questionnaires for adults and children to determine if you're an HSP or C, highly sensitive person. There's no real other diagnosis criteria at this time besides the questionnaires, which are part of the research. So they are diagnostic in nature. And then really understanding, once you figure out, okay, yes, I am an HSP, or I have a child that's an HSC, how does that manifest in their life in negative ways and positive ways? HSCs have a lot of positive things in their life, just like people with ADHD. HSCs are great friends and family members because they're so empathetic. These are the people that everybody's going to with their problems and to talk to and have this really good advice and all of that. So they have a lot of wisdom, they have a lot of understanding and empathy, and make great family members, partners. They can make great employees if they're in a very good environment. Just like people with ADHD, if they're placed in a proper environment, they thrive. Right?
Is their environment different, the types of environment different for HSPs than it would be with ADHD?
It can be. It can be because people with ADHD, as we talked about before, they often have the ability to multitask, and that's a strength. People with that are highly sensitive, they need to dial back the multitasking a little bit because they might get overstressed by a situation where they're multitasking.
Got it.
Right? So the thing that's important to understand is to honor wherever you're at and wherever your child is. That means not trying to make them what you think they should be or what society wants them to be or tells you is the right thing to be, because this is the way that these kids are wired. This is not something they're making up or something they're just being too sensitive or, just not being able to focus. This is truly the way their brain's wired, and the way that they function. And there are things to overcome that. So honoring where they're at and then strategizing with them, with your child, just as you would yourself if you're an adult, strategizing with your child, how can we make this better? What are the ideas that you have to make these socks so that they don't bother you all day long in your shoes? Somebody figured out you just turn the socks inside out. So that's an example of one easy strategy that is perfect for everybody involved. Right? So it's about finding strategies and using your creativity and getting buy-in and asking your child their opinion. Creativity is one of the most amazing qualities that people with ADHD and HSPs have in common. People with ADHD, we know that these people are the big thinkers in our history, right? The people that were able to, because they don't filter, they have so many ideas going on at one time, they are able to look at things differently and see things outside of the box and see solutions and ideas and use that super creativity for good, and they come up with ideas that nobody else could think of. Same thing with HSPs. Very, very creative if they're in a nurturing and supportive environment.
Right. Yeah, that's great. All right. So tell us again how we get more about the research for HSPs. What was the website again?
It's hsperson.com.
Okay.
Dr. Elaine Aaron.
Okay.
And there's also the questionnaires on my website under tools.
And what is your website?
My website is gracefulspaces.vegas.
Graceful Spaces?
Spaces with an S, .vegas.
That's .vegas, okay. Graceful Spaces .vegas.
.vegas, right.
And they can find that questionnaire as well, right?
Yes, they can find that questionnaire and all kinds of strategies, just like you would offer in the ADHD profile, healthy eating, getting enough sleep, meditating, or having some sort of calming mechanism. All of those things overlap between HS persons and people with ADHD. Got it.
And you also have a free gift that you wanted to offer people that are watching today. And what is that gift?
So I have two things. I have a PDF that is called Transcending Trauma and Emotional Protocol. And for me, one of the hallmarks of dealing with ADHD, HSP, or anything in your life, but particularly these two things, is helping people really get in touch with their emotions and understand what's driving them and how that affects other people around them and how other people's emotions affect them. So this Transcending Trauma and Emotion Protocol uses a few different things, and it's a great thing. You can do it in 5 minutes. You do it around a negative emotion that you want to shift and release, and adults can do it, and you can do it with your child. Kids that are 4, 5 years old can do this, and you can make it a game to do it with them. You can do it together and offer a reward and make it a game. And it's a really easy thing. You can shift a situation within minutes of just doing this protocol.
Got it. Okay, and we'll have the link to that PDF just below this video. What is the other gift that you mentioned that you had?
So the other gift is that I'm opening up 10 30-minute spots to do a free evaluation of whether or not somebody is a highly sensitive person or has a highly sensitive child.
Okay.
And
this is beyond what they would get in the questionnaire, right?
Yes. So they would take the questionnaire first, and then we'll have a 30-minute one-on-one discussing the unique issues in their situation, because again, all HSPs or HSCs also look different. They, they don't, nobody's exactly the same, whether it's HSC or ADHD, all that. So we would discuss all the details of that situation and then talk about tools and strategies that they could use in their own home to assist their children and themselves.
Perfect. Okay, great. All right, so there we go. And if people want to get a hold of you, how do we contact you?
The easiest way is to go through my website, gracefulspaces.vegas. A contact form, so they can email me easily.
You want them to email you from the contact form?
They can email me from the contact form, and I also have I'll have a scheduler on there for the 10 free sessions.
Perfect.
And then they can also, if they just want to email me to get other information, they can do that with the contact form. Yes.
Fantastic. All right. Well, thank you so much for being part of our program here in the ADHD Toolbox. And so that's something viewers you probably haven't heard before, the HSP, highly sensitive person, or HSC, highly sensitive child, and how it is different than ADHD, and how it intersects with ADHD, and how it might be affecting you. And you can talk with Cristen and find out a little bit about whether or not you or your family members might have that kind of a condition. So thank you so much, Cristen, for being on our show. And thank you all for watching this episode of the ADHD Toolbox. We will see you on the next episode.
Thanks, Bob.
Thanks.